Welcome back to Dynamo's Dozen, the podcast that'll bring you each and every single week where I'll talk about whatever may be on my mind, from pro wrestling, sports, entertainment, music, movies, muesli, fresh socks and jocks, and everything in between, never forgetting the talc. It's been a while, my brothers and sisters. Well, only 2 weeks, guys, but we've still had some throwback shows for you, and thank you very much for the feedback on those throwback shows. A lot of you guys and gals out there weren't actually aware that they were recorded because they were under the old Dynamo Podcast Network banner. So it's nice to be able to throw one or two of them out in a while, which was actually Niall's suggestion, believe it or not, who is my guest today. And we have plenty in the vault where you won't get to see my beautiful face, which is probably a good thing for some people, but you'll get to hear my rather astonishingly annoying to some people's voice, where I talk to some great guests. So I have lots of stuff in the works to get some throwback episodes up from the early days of Dynamo's Dozen, before it was visual for all of you guys and gals. Almost like Stranger Things. It seems like so long ago, yet it was only like 2 or 3 years ago. But before you go anywhere, do be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell notification button. Let us know your thoughts and opinions. We are available, of course, on Twitter at Dynamo's Dozen. We're also on Facebook at Dynamo's Dozen, and on Instagram at Dynamo's Dozen, and Dynamo's Dozen at gmail.com. So all of your support, everything that you do, whether it be a like, whether it be a comment, whether you dislike it, whether you have something negative to say or not. Listen, I come from a world where any publicity is good publicity, even in 2022. So welcome to the show. And of course, my guest is my right-hand man, as always, the man, the myth, the shopkeeper, Mr. Niall Hogan. How are you doing today, brother?
Good, not too bad at all. Looking forward to this one. This topic we're going to discuss tonight is kind of blown up out of nowhere, really. Nice reactions to a man who knows how to push people's buttons, let's say.
That's a nice segue, Niall, because why don't you tell the people what we're going to talk about today? This isn't going to be a very long episode, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of great content in this episode, because this was originally meant to be an AEW review, but we don't want to give you that in the great words of Chris Tarrington, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We want to give you something a little bit more juicy, a little bit more gossipy. So Niall, tell the people.
Well, we're talking about the man who beat Vince McMahon in the ratings for X amount of weeks and had a big part to play in the Monday Night Wars. Sent out a few interesting tweets, to say the least, that a number of our friends over in AEW reacted to, which was quite hilarious, some of the stuff that came out. But yeah, funny nonetheless. But it's nice to see when people get triggered like that in a world that we call of make believe. People get very real and very triggered.
Yeah, and we are, of course, talking about Mr. Eric Bischoff, who's kind of been having a few little, for the best part of, I'd say, since CM Punk came back, actually.
Yeah.
He's been having a couple of little pops on 83 Weeks on his podcast with our friend and your friend, Conrad Thompson.
Yeah.
And recently, Niall, some of the tweets that you're speaking of, he made one in particular where he said it was, I'm paraphrasing now, you might be able to say it better than me, but it was the biggest flop in history in terms of financial flop in the wrestling business or of all time, or something.
Yeah, he basically said CM Punk signing for AEW was the biggest financial flop in the history of pro wrestling. And like, if you're gonna put out something like that and you're Eric Bischoff, I have to say, I met Eric Bischoff when I was over at WrestleCon this year. We met him in a bar with his son, and he's the coolest motherfucker in the world to me. Like, he's just so cool. And he's one of those guys, you know, that you'd kind of hate, because he'll walk into a party that's going really, really well He'll drop a one-liner and destroy the whole night and walk out. And it's classic Eric Bischoff. This stuff is classic Eric Bischoff. And to see the reactions from Punk and Tony Khan is just hilarious, and the comparisons that they made and the discussions. And even Conrad, like the dynamic between himself and Conrad is huge as well, because Conrad, as we know, is a huge advocate for AEW and stuff like that. He's fully immersed in Project AEW and Tony Khan, you know. And Bischoff just brings that dynamic that they're basically nobodies and all this kind of thing, you know what I mean? So it's an interesting one. But he does say at the end, I don't know if you watch the episode, he does say at the end that, look, he wishes them well, he wants them to succeed, and he hopes they do really, really well. It's kind of like that's the kind of politician in him, really talking out of both sides of his mouth, really, you know. But they took a few stabs at him, and I think, in fairness, they got it wrong, you know.
In what sense?
Well, you know, they talk about, like, when he went into more detail about it, he had to look at the way the ratings have gone kind of since Punk came in, and he said the ratings have been tumbling, and they have been tumbling. So from that point of view, he said, from a financial point of view, it doesn't make sense. And then Tony obviously came back and said, well, hang on a minute, Punk has had the record in all the pay-per-views that he's been on, the 4 I think he's been in so far. He has set the records. He broke the record for selling merchandise on Pro Wrestling Tees within a day and all this kind of thing. And Bischoff's kind of response was, oh, we're going to talk about T-shirts now, are we? All this kind of thing, you know, which was kind of very cutting, I would imagine, you know. But it was an interesting dynamic as well, because he laid it out actually. Bischoff actually went and he got all the ratings and he put them out on a kind of a tweet and stuff
this
like
is a smart man. This is a man that doesn't just you know, he might speak out both sides sometimes, but he does. I mean, when you've got a man that's book is titled "Controversy Creates Cash,"
yeah.
You know?
And then he said there was talk about sort of like WWE and AEW, and the kind of narrative was that from Bischoff's side was, well, there's really only WWE, because AEW is just over here. It's not really this global organization, mammoth monster that WWE is and stuff like that. And he was trying to say basically in a roundabout way that WWE had a monopoly in the business, really. They don't really have a competitor. And then Tony, of course, brought up the court case with Jerry McDevitt with MLW to prove that actually they don't have a monopoly, because here's all their competitors and things like that also. And it was kind of a stab, but then you had them talking about, they were talking about the Friday
Tony got a bit
wars.
emotional, didn't he? Like
he did, he left Floyd, yeah.
But he came across as a kind of a dork, if I'm being honest. Like I was, and look, I'm a fan of Tony Khan. I've always been a fan of AEW. I'm rooting for them as well. Like I said, I still, you know, we're talking about, you know, an upstart company in the grand scheme of things versus a company that's an establishment now, you know, ingrained in Americana. But I think he let himself down a little bit here on this interview. I don't know whether he had a little too many beers or something, but he kind of came across as like he just came out of finishing his, you know, the second round in Dungeons and Dragons or something, and kind of
he's like he was a fan trying to fight his corner, you know. Sometimes
trying to cut a promo,
he was basically trying to be, you know, maybe what Bischoff and the boys were years ago. And it kind of didn't really work, really, because he kind of comes across a little bit goofy and stuff like that, you know, that kind of way. And it's not. But the thing about it as well is,
and that's like, not a knock on him, by the way. It's just it's not in his DNA.
But it's kind of like, you know, when you're out for a beer with a bunch of wrestling fans, maybe after a show or something like that, and one of them is like a huge fan of a wrestler, whichever wrestler it is, and you turn around and you kind of drop a clanger and go, no, actually, he's shite. And this guy has fed in all his life to this wrestler. And like, you've just upset his whole day to the point where he just explodes and practically tries to go into promo mode. And I just thought, you know something? It was a perfect opportunity for Punk to respond with nearly like a pipe bomb thing. But Tony jumped in. And then Punk had to kind of backtrack and go, well said kind of thing. Fist pumping kind of thing, you know? Yeah, and I was there going, Punk would have responded to that much better in the moment, because obviously he knows how to do that kind of thing, you know. But then it got down pretty deep and dirty, like, you know what I mean?
It
There was
did.
back and forth about the failing at real fighting and all this. Like he touched on Punk's failed UFC career and stuff like that and all. Like it got deep.
You see, I think this goes back as well, doesn't it? To to a couple of years ago. Well, no, to like in the last, I suppose, 12 months, but it was early into Punk's reign when Punk had kind of spoken about Hulk Hogan and kind of said something derogatory about Hulk Hogan. I don't want to paraphrase on that. And obviously Bischoff and Hulk are very, very close, and he kind of mentioned about the NWO and stuff. So I think Punk had kind of helped ignite the fuse in Bischoff there a little bit for him to kind of come back at him. And the one thing about they're actually peas in a pod, Bischoff and Punk, in a lot of ways, because they're both great businessmen, obviously in different senses of the word. But both of them are super articulate, and both of them know different, I suppose, different aesthetics of the business inside out. Punk knows the business inside out in terms of from a performance standpoint and how to make merch, whereas Bischoff knows everything about the TV side of it and how to build a company from, that's on the brink of bankruptcy and turn it into a global brand. So they're kind of peas in a pod in a lot of ways. I almost pay, you know what, I would pay money, and I'm sure the listener out there would pay mega money if somehow, and I don't doubt this, man, if somehow Brother Conrad could manage to pull off a live debate at a Starcast with CM Punk versus Eric Bischoff, that would be mega bucks, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be electric. But I think my money would be on Bischoff.
Yeah, me too.
100%. Look, like some of the comparisons they made in this spot were a bit crazy. Like,
all right, give us a few.
Well, Tony was kind of presenting the narrative that like AEW was going to have a bigger impact on the wrestling business than WCW, and I was thinking, well, that's clearly not going to happen. Not a chance.
And not yet, anyway.
Not never. Not never.
Okay, fair.
Let's be honest here, Let's be honest here. Because then they were saying, I mean, the narrative went as far as to say, I think, what was it? He said the impact that Punk has had on the business was bigger than Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Macho Man. And I was thinking, no, stop. No. And when you start going down that road into that kind of silliness, and the problem is once you start down that road, it's very hard to backtrack back up off that road.
You see what the problem we could have. That's a good. Let's pause there and have a conversation on that, right? I remember that comment, right, and I remember trying to actually have a conversation with a couple of people on this, not on a podcast, obviously, but in person.
Yeah.
And I was saying, right, there's something. There's Eric is my guy, right? Context is king, but CM Punk is my guy too. I mean, I love everything about CM Punk in the wrestling world. Stood true to his word, fucking gave the FU to a company that he felt belittled him. And, for that, he's forever in my good graces in terms of just having the balls to go, nah, I don't need you. I'll go do commercials like the old Eddie Murphy, Larry Holmes joke. Fuck back then. I'll go do commercials. Campbell soup, it's a chunky soup, it's a liquidy soup. I like soup. Everybody remembers that one. So I kind of like that aspect of CM Punk. And I get that Bischoff was a little bit of a slimy businessman and stuff like that. So I get that. But I love both of them for different reasons. Now, Bischoff has obviously got a bee in his bonnet because Punk was saying, well, I'm a bigger star than, Scott Hall and Diesel, Kevin Nash. And again, I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not saying they were the exact words, but that was where the original kind of, I suppose, beef came from. And yes, absolutely. Punk circa whatever, when the pipe bomb was dropped, individually was a bigger star in the wrestling business than a Scott Hall individually or a Kevin Nash individually, without a shadow of a doubt, and a better worker, blah, 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 had a better year. When you bring Macho Man,
because I think originally he had a spat with Kevin Nash as well back in the day, didn't he? CM Punk, didn't he?
Yeah,
I think didn't they have words backstage as well at one stage at a show and stuff
I
as well?
believe so. I believe so. Yeah, I believe Nash was fired actually by H even. I think at one point. Well, let go. I don't know what that was about, but when you bring Macho Man into it, I mean, I think even CM Punk would not put himself in the Punk wouldn't be that egotistical to override the Macho Man. He's a major Macho Man fan, so that's obviously Tony. But Tony Khan has come out and said some of these things where like Punk should be going, dude, shut the fuck up.
this guy.
Do you know what I mean? Like, come on, dude. So I think there's been it's just classic pro wrestling. It's politics. It's and I have to give a shout out to friend of the show, by the way, Vince Russo, who is no friend of Eric Bischoff in any sense of the word, but this came to light from me because Vince Russo came out in defense of Eric Bischoff on his Twitter and said, listen, Bischoff gets it. It's all well and good saying, oh, Bischoff's just a mark sitting at home, over in his woodlands or in his desert or wherever he's living. In Montana, I believe, is it? Somewhere like that. He has a big ranch. He goes, but the guy's making money off the back of this, and he's not acting like a mark. You've got the head of a billion-dollar corporation supposedly coming out and acting like a mark and a jackass. He goes, there's only one winner in this. So I just thought we put some context on that there, just purely for the listener if they haven't heard about it or whatever. But I mean, this is kind of like Punk is kind of somewhere in the middle of this because he's Tony Khan's basically biggest toy, right? He's his biggest. It's his biggest. You're a football man. It's his biggest transfer of all time. So he's trying to make it work, and he's trying to. But instead of just letting it naturally progress, which we'll get on to later, we'll have a conversation as to how we think Punk can grow that brand and grow himself. I'm sure we'll have a conversation on that. But this is a situation where Tony needs to just take a step back and shut the fuck up now.
I think so. I think the problem for Tony Khan is I don't think he realizes the time and the investment that needs to be made to create a history and a legacy to be talking this kind of talk. And I think what happens is he's gone out and he's bought a number of seeds and he's planted them, and he's not willing to give them the time to grow. He wants them to flower straight away. And I think that's the problem. And the problem is as well, he went out and he pinned a lot of guys down to contracts and he dumped them out there very quickly, bang, one after the other. Remember back in the day, like he was just banging out guys week after week after week. It was Jericho, Moxley, Punk, Bryan Danielson. All these guys just kept on pinning these guys out. Miro just kept on dropping guys out there, you know what I mean? Till eventually got to a stage where the fan base was sitting back each week going, who's coming this week? Who's coming this week? And there was just a desire for dropping guys all the time. But I think that the problem
he was like the lad that doesn't get at him, hanging outside a knocking shop waiting for all the hand-me-downs to come out all the time. And that's the way it started to come across, whereas he didn't need to go down that road. It was like
a spoiled child at Christmas, that gets loads of gifts. And what happens is you're unwrapping all these gifts so quick, you don't get the time to digest and enjoy each gift for what it is. And that's kind of the way I describe AEW. But I just think
it's a good analogy.
I suppose, and I mean, when you had Vince on your show and stuff like that, I think yourself and Vince got into a conversation about the whole needle moving thing, as they call it these days, needle movers. And he was very strong in his opinions about AEW and the guys that were in there in terms of moving needles and stuff like that. And you both had a nice little back and forth. So your viewers should check out that episode as well. It was really, really good. But it's an interesting dynamic with AEW. I mean, I don't know what your feelings on it are, but I think he's obviously paid these guys a lot of money. And I mean a lot of money. When you listen to Jericho talk, I mean, he made the reference that this is NFL money, right? My view is it's probably better money than WWE, but it's nowhere near NFL money. It's somewhere in between.
Jericho's a smart man. I'd say what he means for a pro wrestler, it's
NFL, the equivalent NFL money for pro wrestlers. Yeah, but I think I don't know. There's just something. Is there something in AEW at the moment not right at the moment? I mean, we're hearing the MJF stuff. We know
Cody.
that
Cody's
Cody has gone to WWE. You know, Jericho's getting on with it, but you know what, Jericho could change his mind in a moment's notice and decide to do something different.
Jericho could go back to WWE after his next Fozzy tour. Like he's...
Well, listen, we know the story there. The legacy of Chris Jericho is in WWE, and we know that he will eventually go back to WWE and do the DVD and the Hall of Fame and the last WrestleMania moment and all that when he wants to finish his career. You know, and it's same. And look, me and you both have very strong views on the own heart stuff as well. We don't always agree on some of it, but we agree on most of it. And to me, in there as well, for me, that feels a little bit weird in there, you know what I mean, in terms of those guys running that. But I can understand why it goes there and not to the other place as well.
What did anything ever transpire with, and that's still to be done, or is it pending with bringing Brett in?
Brett came in. Brett came in and did his bit and went, got paid and did his bit and went then.
Yeah, but there was then talk about Brett, possibly they wanted him to come in and do more with in terms of the backstage stuff and helping guys.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard anything.
That was the word on the street at the time.
Yeah.
But that could have been again. It could have been dirt sheets, or it could have been it could have been a hope from someone within the company. But I can't see Brett willing to commit to traveling to Florida once a week at 63 years old when he's enjoying his life. You know what I mean?
Not at all.
And he doesn't need it.
And to be honest with you, I don't know whether he wants to be in that environment again of an upstart company.
No.
I think at his stage in his life and stuff like that, he's sitting back, he's doing conventions, he's meeting fans, he's loving life. He has a great family life where he is.
But he also has a good relationship with WWE and all now as well. So
exactly,
sure
and he was brought in really to bring, I suppose, legitimacy to what they were trying to do with the Owen Hart Cup and stuff like that, and that's fair enough.
Yeah, I get
if that's what they want to do, we get it.
Yeah,
exactly. But I don't think that's. I think when he goes in there and looks at that, and he looks at the WWE stuff, as I said to you after WrestleMania, they're poles apart.
It's chalk and cheese,
man. You know, it's absolutely chalk and cheese. As I said to you, it's like looking at a different sport or a different entertainment. And that's fine because there's room in this whole fan base for both, and there always has been. But I just think that some of this stuff was just classic, like you know, Bischoff being referred to as a carny dipshit and all. And it was kind of weird.
Who mentioned that? Was that now just a random tweet, or was it a?
No. It was Punk. It was Punk who referred to him as that.
A carny dipshit.
Yeah. Punk turned around and said he referred to he referred to Bischoff and other opinionated old timers as carny dipshits after Bischoff called out AEW and its inability to move the TV ratings needle.
Well,
so it's a.
You know, I don't know. Like I don't have a pony in the race in this one. I'm playing devil's advocate on both sides on here. I think, you know, because it's a strange one, that one. I think Punk is quite a smart man, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of work within the work here.
The Bischoff's there could be. I mean, that could be the case, of course, because it's definitely got the wrestling audience and industry talking.
Because I mean, Punk is as carny as they come. I mean, Punk's hero is Bret Hart. He's basically doing Bret Hart matches all the time now. You know, in homage, which I love to see, which is great to see.
So
I don't know. I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit and be like, okay, because I mean, I don't want to smite either component here because you know. I suppose let's have a look at the truth and the facts of the matter when it comes to ratings and stuff like that. Now, this I do have a little bit of a say on, and I do have a little bit of a pony in the race. I do think that this year could have been a lot better for AEW ratings wise. I do think some of those summer signings, as they say, the free agents that they signed and they have since let go, guys like Jelly Janela and all that. I mean, there's a fucking idiot if ever I've seen one. I mean, that guy's lighting himself on fire in a ring now, trying to save his foot the other week. I don't know if anyone's seen that. That's just an absolute moron. So I'm glad Tony Khan has seen sense and got rid of idiots like that. But that was the problem you had when you were bringing in the books and, you know, the likes of them and putting them as vice presidents and stuff like that. It was like, and I think that's what Cody saw himself. It was like, this isn't fucking to my liking, you know what I mean? Now there's been some
in Cody's words, he said, "This is not the project we started or envisioned."
There you go. That's what I'm saying, because all the indie fucking nuthuggers come in and they were trying to appease the indie fans. And the problem you have with the indie fans is, yeah, they're great. And they are, because a lot of them listen to this show. And listen, I love indie wrestling. But they're not going to get you to WrestleMania. They're not going to get you to that next level. And don't, like, make no bones about it. Of course, Tony Khan wants to get to that level. He just proved it the other day with that outburst. You know what I mean? We're bringing Jerry McDivitt in and bringing all that kind of stuff in. Of course, they want to get there, but how you get there is a slow process. You made the analogy earlier. You plant the seeds, but you don't expect flowers the next day. You know what I mean? You let them bloom, you let them blossom over a year or two. And I think, from my perspective, I thought they ruined CM Punk's return from the get-go, because. And listen, I love CM Punk, but maybe he had a hand in this too. This whole nice Punk coming out saying, I've got nothing but time, I'm happy to be here, crying at the end of the show, and being this humble guy. That's what you do when you're retiring. They didn't bring him back with a bang, you know what I mean, and put him into don't put him into a title picture straight away, but bringing him in as the old veteran to work with the young guys straight away was the wrong thing to do for me. From my own personal perspective, he's your major star. He's coming in on record money, mega money. You get him to the dance. Now, I don't think all is lost, because now he's the AEW champion. I also think it was the wrong move to keep the belt on our boy Adam Page for so long too, because you're trying to get him to be the star that he's not yet. You know what I mean? You could have done many things with that one. Get the belt on him, fair enough, but take the belt off him after that and put it on a legitimate star.
I think what they were trying to do was, I mean, they obviously had to react to Kenny Omega going out with the injuries and stuff like that, and having to take this prolonged time off and stuff like that.
But do it with Punk or Jericho then.
Yeah, but I think the situation with Page was always viewed at that stage as being that next guy. And I think what happened was, in being that next guy, what they've done is they've tried to legitimize his career by putting him in against guys. But I think what it is maybe the programs are not long enough to settle in our minds to legitimize him as a world champion. And I think it's kind of rushed, where they were kind of nearly giving him a new guy every month. And they were trying to build up both him and the title to be something really, really huge by feeding them these guys. And I just think it was it felt rushed. Like if you asked me now how long has Page had the belt, I couldn't tell you.
No, but that's a good point that you made there, because the thing is, they're actually in a very privileged position of going back to the old WWE way, where they don't have pay-per-views every single month. And they could have really pushed the narrative of him being the main guy. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just think they're, I don't know. I think Tony Khan is a mark. I'm going to be honest with you. I think he is a big mark. And again, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. We're all marks.
He probably, in fairness, he probably referred to himself that way. In fairness,
listen.
I mean, he is. He's basically a wrestling. He's a huge wrestling fan who had an awful lot of wealth, who wanted to create a promotion and give wrestlers another avenue to earn their living, and that's to be commended. There's nothing wrong with that.
100%.
But somewhere in between him potentially sitting in the front row and someone at the back who actually structures this a certain way, and to bring in the guys that he brought in and put them in those privileged positions, as you said, the books and guys like that. It's not really the way to go about it. It's not really the way that would lead to success and longevity, if you like.
Well, look at what he's done he's brought in Jake, he's brought in Dean Malenko, brought in Arn, brought in Tully. He's literally, there's many more. he literally has all of the components backstage to run a very, very well drilled professional wrestling show. It's not that fucking hard. You know, take away the television. You're paying the guys in, you know, in the background to bring you, you know, a really well televised, you know, telecast, as Tony Schiavone used to say. You've got the commentators there.
Yeah.
Your job is to make sure that the storylines and the matches in there are fucking perfect. And there has been some great matches, I get it, but there's been some fucking god-awful ones too.
Yeah.
But there's not enough storyline in there for me. I mean, right now I do still think there's a chance for them to literally build on this. This is where I was going to go with this. Off the back of this, Punk now has an opportunity, if he fucking allows Punk to do so, has an opportunity to that guy needs to go heel yesterday. Yesterday, he needs to go heel on everyone and start calling out people in the ring, throwing little innuendos at the, you know, at the Bischoffs and whoever else in the world, all that kind of stuff. Not just little jabs at WWE for the sake of it. You know what I mean? That's been done before, and it's growing old now. But I think
they should totally avoid that.
Exactly. No, but that's what I'm saying. But in terms of like Punk coming out and turning heel on people and saying, you're the ones who are listening to all these idiots on podcasts who achieved something 20 years ago, you know, stuff like that. Use that word, the carny word or whatever it was that you said earlier, you know, because I'm sure Conrad would love that. You know what I mean? Start using it to his advantage. And you know, there's no one better in the business than to do that than him. Yeah. But I think that's really what you need to do now, because they need to trim some of that roster. They shouldn't have been worried about that Rampage thing on every week as well, building new stars and all that stuff. Listen, Nitro was able to do it in 2-3 hours back in the day. You know, Thunder came later. Yeah. You know,
I think what they were trying to do is they were trying to follow the WWE model with having their weekly shows and then their NXT and all that kind of stuff. And because they had brought in some people that were quite raw, they felt they needed to give them some sort of exposure, a bit of TV time, and try and train them up that way, you know. And it's a weird move to happen.
Well, that's bullshit. That's why WCW had the power plant. You know what I mean? WCW had the power plant for that. You know, that's where the likes of DDP and all came from. And Goldberg just never got it anyway. But that's neither here nor there. He's still a megastar. You know what I mean? All these guys went to the power plant. The Giant, you know, Paul White, Big Show, they all went down there. Like, you don't want lads learning on the job on a Rampage every week. I mean, some of these guys like that came out were just literally slabs of meat, and they were shocking. You know what I mean? You know, I wouldn't have advocated even for myself if I was back in 2002, circa 2004, when I was upcoming. I'd have been asking, oh, well, gee, but probably you would have been going, yeah, give me a shot. But in hindsight, you'd be like, Jesus Christ, I wasn't ready. You know what I mean? And some of these lads must be asking themselves that. Yeah. I do commend what they did, though. I mean, they've given a lot of guys opportunities now that can go out and earn money on the indie scene. But like I mentioned earlier, you've got idiots like Joey Janela then that thinks they're a big star, setting his foot on fire and, you know, potentially burning down a fucking building, let alone himself. I'm not sure whether you saw that clip, but it was frightening. So I think Tony has a chance now, if he can assess it, just trim down the fat a little bit and start working on that kind of, you know, keep your in between, have 3 solid storylines the way they used to. 3 solid storylines that keep your 2-hour show as your 2-hour show, and then in between you can put the up and comers. Because don't forget, Niall, when we used to watch, I know you didn't do it as much as me, but I used to watch WCW. Like, I watched the likes of Jericho and Rey Mysterio, especially Jericho, for example. I watched him make his way into becoming, you know, someone that should be noticed, and then you put a pin on it, and then you keep it at the top of your list to go, I want to see more of that guy, to then becoming a guy who got 30-second promos in between here and there, to then becoming the star of the show in the cruiserweight division. You know what I mean? And that's how it builds. It should be organic. And I think
logical development.
Logical development. A 2-hour show where you go, right, we've got our 3 core storylines, our main storyline that involves, you know, your title picture, which it always should be. The women obviously now have a big say, so that should be one in there. And then whatever else you've got in between. But there's too much of this gang shit, and there's too much of Jericho kind of just doing what he wants to do in between with all this kind of gang warfare and all this kind of nonsense.
I think the problem is when you get to a stage where you have the likes of Chris Jericho in there and CM Punk. And I mentioned CM Punk when he signed, and I remember when he came in, I said to you, they're eventually going to lead him to the title. And once they lead him to the title, then what do they do? It's the same with Jericho. If you look at Jericho at the moment, like reinventing yourself in WWE is a whole different fishbowl than reinventing yourself in AEW.
Yeah.
It's very, very different, and we know how successful Jericho. Some would argue Jericho is the GOAT of reinventing himself and reinventing characters and redeploying himself out there. I think in AEW, it's a little bit tougher because I suppose maybe the crowd are not as open to it. Maybe they don't see it like if you have a section of the crowd in there that are New Japan and Japanese fans, you know, they want the Painmaker, they want this guy, the guy that they associate with that. But he's going in there and he's consistently trying to reinvent himself, but he's trying to do it in a way where he's trying to bring guys along with him. And again, for some reason or another, it comes across a little bit goofy and a little bit kind of weird. You know what I mean? Whereas I think, you know, the stuff he was doing, like if you think about when they put him with Kevin Owens in WWE and the job he did on Kevin Owens was outstanding. You know what I mean? When you think back to it. I don't think it has the same effect in there because I think maybe some of the guys don't get it. I watched him in the ring there a few weeks ago, and he was in the ring cutting some sort of a promo, this new thing he's doing, and there was another guy beside him just jumping around talking shit into a mic non-stop, and it was kind of irritating to the point where I didn't want to watch it then.
Yeah.
So I can understand in the product where people go in and they watch it and they're hitting numbers of 1.1, and then it suddenly drops down to 6,000-7,000, because there's a kind of in each of the sections. There's a kind of stuff that you want. So you want to listen to Jericho. You want to listen to Punk. You want to listen to Daniel Bryan. You want to see what William Regal's doing. You want to see what Moxley's doing, these things. But everything outside of that, MJF, I suppose, as well, but everything outside of that then, what do you really want to see? There's not a whole lot of substance underneath that bed. And that was my biggest fear. My biggest fear for AEW was when they brought in Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, Jon Moxley, Chris Jericho, all these guys. I did make the point that I thought there would be fans sitting in the crowd waiting for those guys' moments during shows, and everything else has a drop off. And that was the fear, because as we said, there's 4 or 5 stars that have gone in there, and the rest are kind of just wrestlers. And that causes the drop off, I think. And the problem is they don't have a stacked roster, if you like, in terms of, you know, this level of stardom. Like I suppose the gap between that level and where Punk and the boys are is probably MJF. But it's really only MJF that they have in that position. Maybe Miro to an extent because he's been in WWE and stuff like that. He kind of fills that void.
But even Christian Cage and all is in there, and like still a big star. Christian, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But we know the story with Christian. Look, we all love Christian. There's no doubt about it. We've loved him for years. We know all the stuff he's done. You know, but in terms of actual real star power, in terms of being that guy, you know what I mean? He just unfortunately falls short in my book. And I know your Christian fans that view the show will probably don't go, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Look,
you're right though. You look at an Edge, and like, even though some say Christian is just as charismatic, funnier, he's probably as good in the ring, Edge just has that X factor. It's
you look at the benchmark that we talk about. The benchmark for us, you know, we talk about Bret Hart, we talk about Shawn Michaels, but in the current climate, the benchmark for us is Randy Orton. Yeah. Randy Orton is that benchmark, okay? So we know in terms of that benchmark, we know Punk can reach that benchmark, no problem at all. We know Daniel Bryan at times can reach that bench if he needs to and if he's motivated enough. We certainly know Jon Moxley can do it as well if motivated and head in the game and wants to do it.
I would say a tier below I would say
Slightly, yeah.
Here,
But you know, by working with a Randy Orton, you know, he could raise his game to that level to do what needs to be done.
100%.
But outside of that, we know that MJF has huge potential. But outside of that, and we know the issues with MJF as well. MJF couldn't demonstrate any more that he wants out of there.
But you know what? I mean? A year ago, I would have told you MJF needs to stay where he is. Blah 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 blah. Now I think WWE is his calling, because like I look at I'm kind of with you in a lot of ways. I still think there's potential there for AEW. I think there's a lot of potential there, without a shadow of a doubt. I don't think it's definitely a level above what's come before, if that makes any sense to you. Since the demise of WCW, so it's still a level above TNA. It's a level above all the ROHs and stuff that's came before, because it has that big TV deal. It has that star power. I mean, TNA had star power too. Let's not
absolutely
fool ourselves. But I think it's still a little bit better than that. It's a little bit more constructed than that. However, there's something missing. I don't know what it is. I think everything you've said is absolutely correct. I think it's I think a lot of boys they know there's the alternative now. You know what I mean? They know that if they leave WWE, they can go there.
And vice versa. But the problem is, which is great for the boys and girls, by the way, I love it. But it's like, what are you going to do when you get there? You know what I mean? And what are they going to do with you? There's no actual, like, there needs to be somewhere in the middle. They need to not be WWE, but not be AEW either. Which is where MJF kind of falls.
Exactly. So they need to find a way to, like, not be WWE and have 20 writers backstage, but they need to get someone in there, like I mentioned before. You know, say what you will about him, but you know, the old Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan, he did do a great job in terms of putting together a lot of the main stuff for the main storylines within WCW. And I think, you know what, if I was Tony Khan, I'd be listening to fucking Eric Bischoff and offering the guy a job, to be honest with you.
See, I think what it is as well, and I remember, I think I messaged you the night of WrestleMania and stuff like that, and especially night one, and I said, there's levels to this game. I was in
London, and you'd sent me,
you were over for your Chelsea game, and I said there's levels to this game, and like WWE on that night absolutely blew it out of the water and showed that they can do what they want to do when they're motivated enough and when they feel they have to do it and stuff like that. And I told you that I could just see visions of Tony Khan watching WrestleMania 38, banging the desk and the walls, going, fucking hell, going crazy over this, going, you know, this is what he would love to aspire to be. But I don't think it's what AEW is going to be. And I think what happens is there's probably a really difficult point there where they turn around and there's an acceptance that they could never do that. And probably nor should they. And that's the real conundrum for them, because he kind of like I can't ever imagine Vince McMahon at a press conference losing the rag like that talking about AEW. You know what I mean? I just don't think it would happen, because I don't think it's in his stratosphere. And I just think for AEW, I think if they're just clever at the way they grow things and clever at the way, as you said, as they organically grow on this journey that they're on, and offer us a product that's different from what we get from WWE, that gives us a wrestling show that we all crave for and stuff like that, they'll be successful and they'll do okay. But history repeats itself here all the time. When you want to become Monday Night AEW or you want to become AEWWE, it's over. It's over. And even those guys, you imagine those guys, like, and this was the analogy I said to you, and I think I sent it to you on WhatsApp after night one of WrestleMania 38. I said to you, imagine Jericho sitting at home watching that. Imagine Moxley sitting at home watching that. Imagine Bryan Danielson sitting at home watching that. And how they felt. And for all the fluff of, oh, we hate that place and it was toxic and this, that, and the other, and blah, 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 and all that other stuff. Adam Cole as well, you know what I mean? And, you know, all the stuff that came out, and some people said, no, I left and we left on good terms and all that kind of stuff, and blah, 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 and that's fine and all. But the reality is, any of those guys on that night would have donated a limb to be involved in night one of WrestleMania 38. It was absolutely outstanding. And I just think that's the kind of dynamic that they look at. And I just don't see AEW ever getting to that point, or whether they should.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way I see it, as far as I'm concerned, as of right now, you know, Tony Khan shouldn't be looking at Eric Bischoff as just some guy that's a mouth.
Be looking at him as an ally.
Absolutely. I mean,
actually, Eric Bischoff should walk around and shadow Tony Khan every move he makes in AEW.
1,000,000%, because I think Tony Khan has the potential. Yeah, because he loves the business. I get it. But the problem is when you love the business and you just literally put your money into something because you love it, but you want to control every part of it, that's when the cracks start to appear. We know
sometimes you're too close to see it.
Well, put it this way, right? For any of our listeners out there, right? I'll give you an analogy of a sports team, right? There's a reason that fans don't represent half of the board that make the major decisions of your particular sports team, whether that be football, basketball, hockey, American football, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a reason, because you're doing it with emotions. You're not doing it with your business brain for the long-term vision.
Yeah.
This is the feeling that I get now with Tony Khan, is that he's doing it, that he feels like he's one of the boys. He's a part of something. You know, he grew up loving the business, and I get it. 100% get it.
Yeah.
If I was in there somewhere where I didn't have a pony in the race, like, right, we have to do a job, let's concentrate on this one section here. Let's get this part of it right. Let's make that fucking a 7 to 8 out of 10 without fail every week. Then let's look at this over here. Let's make sure that that's at least, you want every section of your show to be at least a 7 to 8 out of 10, with the fucking penultimate to be a 10 out of 10 every time. You know what I mean?
And that all the links make sense.
100%.
That all the links make sense. That
100%.
it's not scatterbrained, if you like.
100%. I'll give you an example. When I moved over to WCW back in the late 90s, because obviously I watched WCW back in the early 90s, 93, as like yourself on UTV. We all did. Most of us that are old enough anyway. And it was kind of like, geez, there's the big boss man. He's fucking hell. He looks different. And there's such and such. You know, you'd see all these guys coming out, but you'd watch it because you just loved wrestling. It was an alternative. It was a different show, but you were watching it knowing that come 6 o'clock on a Saturday, Superstars was coming on. And you might get the Smoking Guns versus King Kong Bundy and Tatanka, when Tatanka sold out and bought the money from Ted DiBiase, you know, and you were like, fuck it. But you knew at the end of the show, you were going to see a bit of Brett and Sean, or, you know, whoever. And
hey, I give a left arm today to be still watching Bundy and Tatanka.
100%.
What I have to watch these days.
1,000,000%. But you see where I'm going with this now, don't you?
Yeah.
When I moved over then in the late 90s, listen, everyone knows I'm a Brett guy, so I gave up on WWE for a period of time after the screw job.
You felt hurt.
I still do. No, I'm only kidding. They've employed 2 of my mates now, so it's all good. But the point I'm making, Nitro was a 3-hour show. I would get those tapes from the uncle, like I said, back in the day, and I would watch them not once, not twice. Now, I also understand. Yeah, we need to preface this. We have a lot more going on in the world now, where like television isn't everything. We have so many things that make our brains. We can look at our phones and look at a show on YouTube. We can go on Netflix. We can do that. And I think that has a lot to do with the ratings in wrestling not being the way they used to be. But let's just say we look at the ratings, say, because you're never going to get that 6.8 or that 5.7 again, ever. On either show, because like Stone Cold Steve Austin was an institution, Hulk Hogan was an institution, The Rock is an institution, you know. NWO,
and as you said, there's too much on offer now. Anyway,
it's too much on
offer now. Yeah.
But let's say we're hovering around the 2 million is the cap, and then we're down to like say the 800. So the 800 to the 2 million, WWE are getting the 2 million. because there's not a huge gap. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes WWE, but WWE don't even hit 3 anymore. You know what I mean? Not in a long time, if I'm not mistaken. I could be corrected on that, but I doubt it. So if that's where we're at, and we're just using it as an example, if you're looking from 2 to 0.8, that's where, because times are changing, that's where I would, if I was I'd be looking at creating more kind of content, because WWE have the network. I'll be looking at creating more content. Like, I mean, I saw something very entertaining this morning on YouTube with the carpool karaoke with CM Punk and Britt Baker and check it out. Carpool karaoke, Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, Christian Cage,
which they got from WWE.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course, I get it. Yeah, the ride along and all that stuff. But those sort of things, like, try and create more of that. None of this nonsense of like completely breaking kayfabe. But you see, Tony fucked himself up too as well with the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The chair was gimmicked. Ha 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 ha. Imagine Vince coming out and saying, the chair was gimmicked. Ha. You see, you fucked up from day one, son. What he needs to do
you're treading into the dark side of the ring then, aren't you, really?
Exactly. Like, he needs to pull himself away completely, not be seen on these press conferences, because look, he wants to be the star of the show. It's becoming more apparent, in my opinion, that he is. He's a spokesperson. He's there. He's beside CM Punk. He wants to be the general manager. He wants to be the, blah, 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 blah. Leave it be. That's why Vince has the likes of Steph to step in, because Steph is fucking elegant, and she's.
But you see, that's the problem. The problem is he's sailing his own ship there. He's like, he reminds me very much of Vince back in the day when he didn't really have that support staff, and then he brought in the likes of Patterson and.
But Vince didn't have a fucking bean back then, though.
Yeah.
The difference is this motherfucker has a bean. Or 2.
Yeah, but the problem is, who do you bring in at that level as well?
Conrad.
Because there is
simple.
Yeah, Conrad could be one, but I mean, you don't have a Patterson, you don't have you know what I mean? You don't have those types of guys.
Nobody's fighting with the Pattersons that he could potentially have. I'm sorry, but like, Vince Russo could still offer something to him. I don't know what it is. I'm not saying let Vince Russo in on creative, but he could possibly give him. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe
thinking aloud.
Maybe I just know Vince is actually a nicer guy than people give him credit for, and I'm putting his name in there. But without a shadow, Bischoff could offer him something.
Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt. People like, I'm not going to mention former wrestlers, because people always go, oh, well, this wrestler could help you, like DDP or like Jake is working with them. Jake could offer fucking many words of wisdom in terms of in the ring, and I'm sure he has done. But I get the opinion that a lot of these young bucks now, pun intended, and it's not just aimed at the young bucks, but the young and up-and-comers, don't really give a shit about listening anymore. And that's the problem with the wrestling business.
I think the problem is if you're at the level of a Jake the Snake Roberts, whose intelligence and brains for the business is so above most other people and stuff like that. And what happens is
people,
and if he puts stuff out there, the new generation, probably some of it is probably laughed and scoffed at. You know what I mean? And I think that's the problem, really, that maybe they can't see it and stuff like that. But I just think for some of those guys in there, I don't think I think some of those guys in there, it'd be very hard to advise them down the right road, because they've decided that the business is something totally different to what we believe it is. They, in some respects, for them, the business is of making short little funny YouTube videos and selling T-shirts and taking the mickey out of old legends and all that kind of stuff. And they see it as kind of nearly like a comedy sketch or a comedy skit, you know what I mean?
Whereas,
at times there's a part for that, that's fine. But there is a time where you have to lace up the boots and it has to become serious, and you have to listen to someone, and you have to understand the mentality and the thinking behind the ideas and the thoughts and the train. And it's sometimes that's sadly missing, you know. And I can understand. Look, you look at MJF. I mean, it's very apparent his frustration. very, very apparent, his frustration.
Well,
And it's
all right. Well, yeah, because you mentioned him a couple of times now, so he's probably the perfect person to kind of finish on. He's basically like the hottest. I mean, he still has a year left on his contract too.
something like that, yeah.
Not on major money, I wouldn't imagine. Not major money compared to nothing that WWE could not buy out if need be.
Yeah.
And then you go into a scenario then where if Tony Khan wants to play hardball and goes, no, I'm not releasing you, then you've got an unhappy fucking customer on your hands. And, you know, we have a whole new conversation and a whole new podcast there, but let's not go into that, and let's not get into the hypothetical, because that's not what we're here for. But what do you think it is actually that has drawn this level of frustration from someone who seemed to be completely on board from the beginning?
I suppose you could argue misuse, which is always which is always a line that is spun. Obviously, I mean, we heard it with Cody as well. Maybe there's a lot of background stuff there that's going on that he doesn't really need to be around. Because I think in AEW as well, I get the feeling in the locker room there's a lot of picking of sides and little sort of cliques and stuff like that.
This was always going to be the way, though.
Yeah, but it's what destroys it from the inside. And I'm not saying there isn't that in WWE either, but I think it's probably better managed because it's probably nipped in the bud pretty quick and stuff like 100%. That, you know, to a point. But I think with MJF, I think he's such a talented guy. I think he has huge ambition for himself to really put a legacy in the business and stuff like that. And I think he very quickly recognized that you're not going to define your legacy in the business in AEW. You're just simply not.
And where's he from, Niall?
Go on, remind me.
New York.
Yeah. But I just think, like when you look at it and you look on the face of it, it's just, I see a guy there who's highly frustrated. And look, we knew when Cody jumped, we knew the door was ajar. We knew that the dam was slightly busted. And we knew that
Cody is actually quite close with him anyway, isn't he?
I would have thought so, because I would have thought the issues that Cody had are similar to the issues that MJF is having, but obviously at a slightly different level, if you like. Yeah. But I think it's worrying times for AEW. I mean, they sound like they're under a lot of pressure, reacting to stuff like this and all. And I just think I don't know. I look at it and I think, like, you know, are we looking at Jericho? Is Jericho going to be eventually having second thoughts and heading back if MJF goes?
Well, I mean, he signed a 3-year contract for, like, obviously mega money at the time, but he signed early on, so that 3-year contract must be coming to an end. Obviously, Fozzy must be close. The new album out on tour now, so
and they're going on tour and stuff later in the year and stuff like that as well, aren't they? And
so I'd imagine like that contract must be near the end. That's an interesting take, and I know you're not doing that from like a fucking, you know, from a standpoint that you're trying to say, oh, it's worrying times, AEW could go out of business. But like, if there's a lad in the lake who's swimming comfortably, he's not going to react to the ongoing crowd shouting to save him by saying, no, I'm fine, leave me alone. He's going to swim comfortably, isn't he? It's the lad that fucking is too proud to fucking admit that he's fucking sinking and drowning that is shouting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, we should preface this as well by saying we want AEW to succeed. We want to have an alternative. We'd love to have a potential.
Well, I know you don't know, but I already said that from the start. You don't need to worry. You don't.
No, but I do. I do. Look. These things being successful are fundamental to me and fundamental to my business.
You made a good point to me, actually. Sorry. I'm glad you brought the B word in there, because that is fucking essentially where it all comes down to. Ching, 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 ching. Yeah. Because that's really what keeps the fucking lights on. You, like, the base and all is you know, the Jaguar Stadium and all that, right? I think there needs to be an actual complex, a building. Don't forget, there was Titan Towers before there was fucking nothing else. There needs to be a complex there where there's a staff brought in with a direction. A director of this, a director of that, director of this, a director of that. that's essentially where it needs to be done. The fact that this hasn't been done yet kind of baffles me. Now, it probably could have been done, but it's not on the large scale that we would think. You know what I mean? It's all been done from Jaguar Stadium. It's like managing a football team and then managing a pro wrestling company should be two separate entities altogether, in my opinion.
Yeah, the thing I look at that from a business point of view and being a businessman is if you don't invest in heavily in the bricks and mortar, it makes it so much easier if you feel like walking away to run.
well, no, but that's a good point. That's a good point, which leads me on to my next point there, because we were talking about it, right? We've obviously got the whole kind of toy line, the action figure line, which we're heavily involved in. We're both collectors and sellers sometimes, but mainly collectors. Like, how is it taking this long to get like a CM Punk figure out? You know what I mean? The chap has been there, what? When was the debut? I can't recall, but it was a long time ago.
He's 4 pay-per-views in, so it must be nearly a year, isn't it?
Nearly a year, and it's only a figure coming out now. Like, that's like they're still selling Cody figures, and he's not in your company anymore. I understand you're making the money out of it.
Well, that's always been the case. If you look at the last few releases of WWE figures, nearly half of each series has been wrestlers that have left as well. So
I get it, but they're very quick on the mark. If there's I remember when Goldberg made his return, within a month and a half, there was a Goldberg figure out.
Yeah, I get the point that you're making. If CM Punk had went back to WWE, there'd be a bunch of figures, there'd be merchandise, there'd be books, there'd be DVDs, there'd be headsets, there'd be car mats, there'd be dog bowls.
Yeah, I'm not just using figures as a
but in terms of a merchandise making machine and stuff like that and all, but it's I don't know. I just sometimes think that I think sometimes there's just too much focus on the petty and not enough much focus on the real bones, the nuts and bolts of the business of wrestling and stuff like that and all. I think sometimes it's kind of they try and go tit for tat. And the one thing WWE don't do is tit for tat. They don't get down into that stuff at all. Matter of fact, they probably sit in the offices in Titan Towers laughing at it. You know, I'd imagine Vince McMahon is getting fed information about Bischoff's tweets, and he's absolutely laughing his balls off at the reactions and stuff like that.
I'd say H is actually texting Bischoff, going, you know what, dude, well done.
Yeah. Pop this here's another one for you. Probe this one. Try this one.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But my advice, not that they're going to listen to us, but my advice would be to just shut up and ignore, you know, any kind of speculation. Like, especially if it's whatever about fans' point of view, you're like, oh, we take into account what our fans want. We only want to appease our fans. If that's your business narrative and that's literally how you want to run your business, so essentially what you're saying is we only listen to what our fans think, and anyone that has constructive criticism can go fuck themselves. That is a recipe for disaster.
What did you make of Conrad's comments? Conrad came out and he said to Eric, and it was really interesting when Eric had kind of said that, like, Punk had gone in there and kind of been a financial flop. And Conrad spoke about when Hogan first went into WCW 94, 95, and they paid him a lot of money. And he kind of didn't really bump the business either at that stage.
Conrad is a genius. I like this. I didn't hear this, so I'm already.
Yeah, no, this is what he said, because obviously he was kind of spinning the narrative basically that, you know, it takes time to go in there and build and then bump the business. And he made the analogy to Hogan in 94, 95 when he went into WCW. He didn't elevate the business as much as people would have expected, and obviously got paid a fortune as well. But it was only until, of course, Bash at the Beach and NWO and all that, then it just skyrocketed. And I suppose the thing that we might have to discuss slightly is, do we see AEW down in the future, in another year or two on, having a Bash at the Beach moment or their equivalent of it, where it does escalate and go boom and take off?
You'd like to think so. You know what I mean? I mean, I can't. Look, history is hindsight. I mean, we didn't know at the time that was going to happen. You know, and for most of us, we didn't get to see that. None of us over on this side of the land got to actually witness that live and in person, because obviously we had to get the video, the VHS. I was about to say the DVD. There was no fucking DVDs then.
Hang on 1 second. Just have to lift it.
My first, I suppose my first opening to that was through the magazines, as was yours, I'm sure. And then I got a hold of the tape, a couple of months later. That's how we used to do it back in the day, you know what I mean? But it was still fresh in our minds, because you were like able to put yourself back on that date at that time. I would love to think that, and I mean, that would be my advice to AW, think outside the box somehow. Create a moment somehow where, CM Punk is your baby face, and, he's going to rival with, Chris Jericho next or something, or rival with MJF. Actually, keep MJF happy. Happy. Let him be the next guy who's going in as a heel. And somehow you find a way where they're actually in it together. You know what I mean? Or something. That's
what I was going to think. And I was thinking, you made the point earlier about Punk turning heel. Yeah. I'm wondering if they could book that in a certain way, where Punk turning heel is their Bash at the Beach moment, or their equivalent to it, to elevate them onto that path to go the next 2 or 3 years and blow the ratings and do stuff that needs to be done and stuff, So
because like giving us these dream matches is like, it doesn't last. You know what I mean? That's why WWE make the game every year. You know what I mean? That people can make their own dream matches.
We've a WWE network there that gives us as many dream matches as we want. We can go back through all the years.
But you know what I mean, Niall? Like, you can buy the game for your console every year, and you can put your favorite superstar in there, and you can, I'm actually going to shoot myself in the head for saying superstar wrestler in there every year. And you can gimmick out all you want, you can do whatever the hell you want with it, but we've seen with these dream matches where they go. You know what I mean? I think I mean, look, if you go into a program now with a Bryan Danielson and a CM Punk, or a Bryan Danielson, and a CM Punk and a Samoa Joe, that interests me. And I think without a shadow of a doubt, if anyone knows, you got to get that Iron Man match on a pay-per-view. The one that they did with ROH, you know what I mean? You got to get one of those on a pay-per-view. You got to give something that the WWE aren't giving you anymore. Because Iron Man match won't come into WWE's fucking line of sight now, because they have to get that many people on a pay-per-view. Straight away, hour-long match with fucking Samoa Joe. Think about it. There you go. Hour-long fucking Iron Man match with CM Punk and Samoa Joe with Bryan Danielson as the referee. Has to call
or even a triple threat.
Or a triple threat Iron Man match. You know what I mean? Something. That's start thinking outside of the box and going down the traditional route of what used to bring asses into seats. Because you know what? It's like Jim Cornette always says, it's really not that hard. It's like we always say, we're football guys, right? We always say football is a simple sport made complicated by idiots. And it's true. You know what I mean? Once there's a system in place and you know how to follow the system, it's really fucking simple. It's just when you try and go, blah, 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 blah. So, look, I think there's hope for AEW if they go down that road. I think there's absolutely hope for them. I just don't. I see it. Like, don't get me wrong. I see them doing it. I just don't hold out hope that they're gonna go down all the avenues that we've suggested tonight. But I mean, I'd be pleasantly surprised if they do. You know.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. There's so much in there. There's so much potential with what they have around the product. It's just a question of pulling together and delivering it. Excuse me, in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, those little things. Look at what made the company successful. You know, the people that, for example, the people that you used to mark out for, the moments that made you happy, the programs that made you want to get involved in the wrestling business. Look at them and look at what made them successful. I mean, Punk is a major Bret mark, and we see it. We saw it with the ending of the match. He went for the WrestleMania 8 with Roddy Piper route, where Adam Page had the belt and then put it down, and then Punk got him anyway and got the win. That was a complete throwback. I think Tony Khan needs to look at that as well, and not just Tony Khan. Everything doesn't fall on Tony Khan's feet. I feel sorry for the guy because I think he's actually taken too much on, whereas he should hire some help, some outside help. Go and poach one or two of the fucking guys from WWE that are successful. Give them that little extra bump in pay and less working hours that are unhappy. You know what I mean? Get them in, and doesn't that make sense? Like, get them in and go, right, we've only 2 shows a week. We've only fucking a pay-per-view. We've 4 pay-per-views a year. Come on and work for us and fucking, get paid more, work less, and help us actually. That's what I'd be doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that what football teams do? Sports teams do. They always look for the best, they look for the best, sports psychologists. They look for the best sports analysts, performance analysts and stuff like that. They look for, so why not just, I don't know. I think some of this is ego driven, if I'm being honest, especially after looking at that outburst. That's the first. I've always been a big advocate and defender of Tony Khan, but I think I got to be honest with you. My closing statements are, I think the ego is bigger than I thought.
He's reacting to pressure.
Yeah,
he's reacting to pressure. He's starting to feel the pressure now of the market and the business.
Yeah,
and I assume he's spending an awful lot of money. And I just don't know. I did say to you at some stage, when you're spending all this money, someone at some stage is going to turn around and say, well, we know what's going out, but what's coming back in?
Well, it's his dad that's going to be asking those questions.
Yeah, but the question is this a bona fide business that you can grow it into something special, or is it just a hobby? I think, it's a lot of money to be spending on a hobby if that's the case,
Yeah, and I think you're right, because obviously the dad is the main bread earner. I know he's involved in Fulham Football Club and the Jaguars as well, but it's the dad's money that's mainly doing it. And the dad will be asking questions, and that's probably why there is no building or headquarters built. Yeah. That's why everything is.
Yeah, maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's a case there's pressure coming there, obviously from WWE after knocking it out of the park with WrestleMania and stuff like that. They're kind of seeing it now for what it is and going, this is a gigantic competitor here that we're against, that we're never going to we're not going to be able to overturn it. It's unlikely we're ever going to be able to even get to the point where we really, really match it. And it's probably a tough one when you have to accept that you're the alternative in a market. And it's difficult as well. Maybe he is starting to get pressurized. He's whatever 2 or 3 years now down the line or whatever it is. Maybe people are starting to ask questions and going, now, well, what are we actually making here? What's this going to become? Or are you just on a journey here of fun?
Yeah.
And maybe just pressure being applied at a number of levels. To react to those tweets the way they reacted was kind of symbolic of maybe of what's going on internally there at the moment,
Well, I think so. And I'm going to close it up by saying it's exactly what I said before. Let me get some light on this situation. Sorry, guys. There we go. It's the same question I asked from the get-go. I was like, what have, these major guys that they brought in that was going to build this major company? It's all well and good selling out a one-off show, but to build a sustainable business, it's a different story. Like, where is Kenny Omega now? The Young Bucks are just, they're literally still walking around taking the piss, looking like absolute flutes. Do you know what I mean? While they're involved with people like FDR, a legitimate wrestling tag team. That tag team could have been built.
For 6 or 12 months, you get the good grace of being a new upstart kind of company.
Yeah.
But after kind of 12 to 18 months, people start to look at it and they start to question little things and stuff like that. And it's not a nice feeling in business when you're being questioned and stuff like that.
Let me ask you a question, Niall. Let me ask you a question, because I was a big mouthpiece over this, and it turns out, like most of my fucking opinions, I'm always fucking right, especially when it comes to pro wrestling. Did I not call it with the Young Bucks? Did I not call it with Kenny Omega? Is Kenny Omega a bigger star in America now than he was when he got there? Not fucking really. Are the Young Bucks? Not really. I'll tell you one player that is a bigger star. Absolutely, Adam Page, because they built him from the ground up and they've made him something. MJF was already kind of a star in the Indies and they built him up. But these VPs, what have they done to try and build their own brand or build the brand that's actually paying them? Nothing. They've been in it for themselves. And it's just like I thought, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was no doubt that was going to happen. It was very, the whole setup from the get-go was quite contrived, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of how it unfolded, and, you know, everyone became a VP of something, because how many vice presidents can you have, you know? But yeah, it's just, look, we always said it. We always said if the guys at the top are wrestlers and they're on the roster and they're working, you're always going to have problems when you're making decisions from a creative point of view.
I mean, you could be guaranteed now that WWE wouldn't touch any of those people that I mentioned. Certainly not on a main event level. Absolutely not.
The problem is it's not whether WWE would touch them or not. It's whether they would be able to adjust themselves to go into an environment where they're not creatively in control of their own destiny anymore, and that they have to figure out that life is not about selling merchandise. There's a whole other facet to the business, really, you know.
Yeah, that's why I kind of commend Cody. He's gone back. I know he's doing programs with the likes of the Miz at the moment, but he's gone back to try and build his brand up to get to that level. And I commend him for it, whether it be successful in terms of getting to the World Championship level or not.
Well, Cody's concern is about protecting his family's legacy. Exactly. And he very quickly identified that his family's legacy doesn't sit in AEW. And that's the simple fact of the matter. And I was actually quite shocked.
That's a book you'd like to read, isn't it? Later down the road, because there's something there that he saw that went, nah, this isn't pro wrestling.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily that it isn't pro wrestling, but just that when he was the one who really kicked all this off, when you think about it. I mean, he is the guy historically who put together this whole AEW
of course
thing. Really.
He is, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Star,
and his vision of what he thought it would grow and become is not what's ended up there, which means it hasn't taken the path that he originally envisioned it would take. And only time will tell whether his decision has been right or whether his decision has been wrong. But looking from the outside in at the moment, it looks like his decision to go back to WWE is quite vindicated. And it just remains to be seen. Like, as I said to you, the door's open. How many more are going to walk through that door and have the bravery to do it? It'll be interesting. 100%. I'd bet serious amounts of money on the fact that Jericho will finish up his career in WWE.
I was about to say that. I was going to say I think he's next. I do think you'll see Bryan Danielson probably do it.
Yeah. And there's even been talk of Moxley.
Possibly,
which is surprising
straight and all that as well.
So if you think about it, if you look at AEW, if Jericho was to go back to complete his legacy and his career, if Bryan Danielson was to go back and complete what he wants to complete, if Moxley was to go back, if MJF was to go in, I mean, what's left in there? You've got CM Punk, who's in a bad position because, you know, it'd be very difficult for him to go back in there. Not that I say it wouldn't happen, could happen. But it'd be difficult. Then what else? What else?
Regardless, he can. If that falls tomorrow, Punk can just go, well.
Yeah, I don't think it's a money thing as well. I mean, I know Punk, he got a good deal going back in and stuff like that, but Punk could be concerned about his own legacy as well. I mean, he was building a legacy in WWE and it went off the rails a little bit, became very nasty and became very bitter. Went into UFC. Had the bravery to go and do that, but had the bravery to go and do it, which you commend him on, but it was an absolute disaster. And then he went into AEW to go back and kind of rekindle that legacy in pro wrestling again. Because for him, his career is quite a dynamic, really, isn't it? When you look at it, it's a career of, you know, just kind of stop, start problems. You know what I mean? The flow of it and stuff like that. You know what
But
I mean?
it's in the name, though. It's in the name, and I commend them for it. You know what I mean? I commend them for it. You know, like he was a punk rocker by name, but a punk rocker by actions as well. So I think, you know, no matter what CM Punk does ever, and I think we'll close it on this. No matter what he ever does, he should be commended for making the decisions that he made. He found a pathway back into pro wrestling that suited him, and he didn't compromise with anybody. Didn't lick ass or kiss ass or suck dick doing it. Had the balls, as you said, to get into a cage, which most people sitting at home on their couch would talk about what they would do, but wouldn't actually go and do it. So, you know, fair play to him. And yeah, I think we're both rooting for them. We want them to get there. So I suppose we'll just wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the dogs in your house agree as well. So let's see what happens. And in closing, by the way, this is coming out only 24 hours later. Go team Johnny Depp. I think we'll all just say that there. We'll just throw that out there. This is
absolutely.
A good lawyer always gets found out, and not a lawyer, a lawyer. Oh, but then again, a lawyer as well too in this case.
This was such a waste of 6 weeks. It was so obvious right from the get-go.
So, but you never know, though, Niall. But you never know. So, look,
it'll make a great Netflix documentary eventually, won't it?
Or a next episode. Who knows? We might bring your lovely wife on next to tell us and give us the whole details.
I'll tell you, man, she has been engrossed in it.
Absolutely.
I have felt quite divorced for the last 6 weeks. I've spent most of my time talking into the back of a phone as opposed to a face.
Listen, when Johnny Depp's beautiful face is involved with a woman, you kind of find yourself playing second fiddle. It's probably happened to the best of us. So, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But Niall, been a pleasure as always.
As always, love chatting about it.
Yeah, so that's all for this episode of Dynamo's Dozen. Like we said, what's your thoughts? What's your opinions on this? We don't know. AEW, I think, is in a state of limbo at the moment, and I think they really need to pull something out of the bag with this situation and see how their company is going to go forward. Can't keep calling those meetings on the fly. But look, what say you, listeners? Do follow me. Do follow Niall, of course. If you're a football fan, Niall is dropping content on the daily, even though there is no football at the moment. But he will be dropping daily transfer news as well on the Upper Tier podcast on YouTube, where pretty much you don't have to be a fan of any particular team to watch this show. It's just a great show in general. And you can
just be a fan. Just be a fan of the channel.
Just be a fan of the channel. Yeah, exactly.
It makes life much easier.
Just hit the like and subscribe button. That's all you need to do. That's literally, and it's free to do that. So
for the moment.
For the moment, yeah. But look, until next week, Niall, thank you so much, brother.
No problem at all.
And for me, your host, Ian the Dynamo Kelly, glad to be back. For this week, we are over and out.